Hi guys, welcome back. My name is Shantru Mandari and I welcome you all to the subject which is called as ESG, also called as Environment, Social Governance Principles and Practice, and this is CS Professional New Course 2022 and you're watching Group 1, paper number 1. So now, as you're aware that this is the complete English batch, so we're going to talk about all the things that are being included in your course, and that will be obviously complete English. But before I really do that, since this being the very first class, I like to discuss few other aspects of this entire subject with you as well. So first of all, I like to tell you that this subject has been divided in 3 parts. Like you can call it as part A and then B and then C. Part A actually talks about the governance and sustainability, which is of 65 marks. Then we have the part B, which is of risk management, and again it is of 20 marks. And then the last part, which is of environment, is of 15 marks. So 65 is for part A, 20 is for the part B, and the rest 15 marks is the part C. So this is how this entire subject has been divided. And obviously because it is of 65 marks like the part A, so it really has a lot of content, while the other 2 parts have probably just few chapters. So you need to focus obviously on all the parts to make sure that you really score good marks, and whatever I mentioned during our classes as we move along, try and make your notes. So obviously it is not necessary and it's really not required to just make notes of everything as to what I say, but then whatever you find important, for example, if I'm giving some example obviously which is not there in your notes, then you can maybe just write it down, because for example, if you have your exams tomorrow, you will not be watching this class again, right? You will not be watching this class again just before the day of examination, you know. Or it's not like we are not restricting you to watch, but I'm just saying that sometimes the time is too less and obviously you can't go through the entire class again. So it will be worth mentioning or writing down some notes as we move along, although this notes that we have provided to you are complete in itself. So after referring this notes and the classes, there's nothing whatsoever that you really need to refer further, because everything that is being that is required from the examination perspective has definitely been taken care of in these notes. So now let's get started, and obviously I like to tell you something about myself as well, because this is the very first class. So as I said, my name is Shantru Mandari, and then I qualified CS in the year 2012. So obviously I've done my graduation like BCom, and also done my LLB, LLM, which is the Masters in Law. And right now trying to actually search some college for the Doctorate of Law, which is also called as LLD. Now, apart from the academic side of things, I have been also working as a company secretary in an Australian multinational company here in India, and I've been working as a company secretary from the year 2012. So till the time, from the time I qualified my CS, I have been working as well as teaching. So I've been I think I've taught at various places, including various ICSI chapters as well, and also private coaching. And thereafter I've opened my own venture, as you can see in front of yourself. So this is pretty much about me. And then the last thing is that we do have the classes for all subjects available in normal Hindi and English, and in complete English as well. So just like ESG, if you are looking for complete English for drafting or CMADD, or let's say SMCF or CRBI, we do have all of that in complete English. We might also bring the optional papers in the coming days in complete English. We right now have all of them, but that's in the combination of Hindi and English. So now let's get started with the chapter number 1. This will be the very first part of this entire thing. So when we talk about conceptual framework of corporate governance, in this chapter we're going to discuss, or I'll say we're going to start with the meaning or the definition of corporate governance, and thereafter we'll talk about the elements, the characteristics, and various other conferences or declarations that have been signed by various countries across the world to make sure that this planet becomes a better place to live in terms of the environment, in terms of the financial systems, so that more and more people can be safeguarded against the fraud that's been happening, or the corporate scandals that are being happening. So we're going to discuss all of that in more detail. Let's now talk further and discuss and start discussing about the subject. So it says the mentioning or meaning and the definition of corporate governance. So if I obviously I'll definitely explain that, but if I just talk in general and we discuss in a layman language as to what is corporate governance, and I'm sure most of you will say that corporate obviously means a company, and the governance is the structure or the administration by which the company is being governed. The policies, the process, all is a part of the governance structure. Like, does the company believe in transparency, obviously honesty, integrity? If yes, then this makes obviously a company a well compliant or a well governed company. So I think in the layman language we probably can say these things. Also, I like to tell you, when you've been watching these classes, if you think that my speed is too slow or probably it's too fast, you will definitely have the option in whatever device you're watching the classes, be it laptop or mobile. You have the option to control, meaning that you have the option to reduce the speed, you will have the option to increase the speed. So kindly do the needful as needed. Okay, so talking about the corporate governance, it says corporate governance is basically the application or the probably implementation of the best corporate policies to make sure that the wealth or probably the resources are being equally distributed between all people. So if I talk about a company, and if I talk about corporate governance in that way, the board of directors are getting richer and richer. They've been drawing a lot of good salaries, but when it comes to the employees, then it comes to the shareholders or the stakeholders, they are not getting dividend, they are not getting bonuses, they are not getting a good salary. So this is not a corporate governance. Corporate governance really talks about an equal distribution, whereby when the company moves ahead and it generates profit, that should be distributed between all the stakeholders. Further, it's being mentioned that when you actually include corporate governance in the company, in the heart of the company, all these terms that I was really talking about, which includes transparency, disclosures, accountability and integrity, automatically comes in. I mean, you cannot say that a company is a good governed company but doesn't really have transparency, doesn't have disclosures, doesn't have accountability, does not have accountability. It will not work like that. So if the company is a good company, meaning that it follows good governance structures, then obviously transparency, integrity, accountability will automatically follow. Like, these two things have to move simultaneously, hand in hand. A company can't be a well compliant or well governed company unless it is a transparent company, unless it is a company with integrity, unless it is a company which is accountable for anything that it does. So it's a kind of a thing which has to move in conjunction with each other. Plus, as you would know, that if the company is a compliant company and follows the good governance norms, then it becomes easier for that company to actually even raise the money from the capital market. So you will appreciate the fact that later or sooner, every company wanted to be a big company, every company wanted to have raise capital from the market. And I mean, it's not just about raising. I mean, if you go to the market, you need some people who would like to invest in your shares of the company. And for that to happen, you should have a good track record. If there is a lot of bad things in media and in various other places about a company, so first of all, SEBI will not really permit that company to bring an IPO or an FPO, as the case may be. Now, even if that has been brought to the public will not subscribe it. So it's just like one leads to the other. If you are a good compliant company, there's so many benefits, and one of them obviously includes raising funds from the public. And obviously you can price a share, you can keep the price of your shares even relatively higher, still people will actually come and buy the shares of your company. Talking about the advantages of the corporate governance, obviously it increases or maintain the investor confidence, because if the company is a compliant company following all the rules and regulations, that increases the investor confidence, because they can be sure that their money is not going anywhere else. Like, they have been investing their hard-earned money in a good company, and they will definitely get good returns out of that. So obviously, if the company is a good corporate compliance company, a corporate governed company, then automatically the investor get attracted to that. Obviously, as I said, if you even keep the share price a little higher, people will still buy your shares as compared to any other company. even if you are paying a low dividend, but if you are a good company, people will definitely come to you, because in the end of the day, dividend actually, I think there are two things. One is principal, like the amount you invest, and the other is dividend. People invest in stock market for the purpose that share price can also increase, and they also get dividend. But when it comes to the fact that there's some corporate scandal and the market is being falling, nobody actually cares about dividend. People think that they should get their money back. So at least you are one of those companies that even if the market goes to the downside, the capital of the people that they have invested in you still stays protected. Like they should not really worry about you or the company, because the company has really a strong fundamental or the financials, and the money that's being invested in the company is not going anywhere else. So that's what has been mentioned. If the company is a corporate governed company, it will also take care of the fact that it do the things in a maximum of the best possible way, meaning by increasing productivity, reducing the wastage, and doing the economies of the scale. Side by side, the company also ensures that it has actually contribute to the corporate success and the economy growth. So when we talk about economic growth, means that the company is being paying taxes regularly, the company is being contributing towards, if I talk about corporate success, towards maybe CSR, which is also a social initiative. So it's kind of a 360-degree view that if the company, if you wanted to call a company as a corporate governed company, it is not just about the profit, it is not just about dividend, it is not just about shareholders, but it is all about stakeholders, and the way the company is taking care of the society also gets included in that. So why do you need corporate governance? I think some part of it has already been covered above, but why do we really need corporate governance? I think we have already mentioned that if the company really has corporate governance in place, it gets easier for the company to actually go to the public and raise money. And I think if the company has corporate governance structure in place, it really kind of builds the confidence of the people. So the company actually gets successful in winning the trust of the investors. And as you would appreciate, that trust is the most important thing. Like even if the even if the relation between two people, be it personally or professionally, is not that well at this particular point of time, but still if they trust each other, the relation will get well in some days or probably later on. But if the trust element is missing, then for sure the things will never ever be the same. So I think corporate governance is needed to make sure that the investor trust can be taken up by the company, and obviously because of this, the company can also raise funds and also get a good image in the global market. Because it's not just about fundraising in the Indian market. You must have heard about the international listing. There are various companies which actually issue ADR, GDR. So who will subscribe to those kind of securities? If the company is not doing well in its home country, let's say India, then there's no point of trying to raise the money from overseas. If you're not doing well here, and if the people are not giving you the money here in India, then do not have much expectations from the people of outside India. Why would they invest in your company when your people, your country people are not investing? So if the company has good corporate governance structure, then definitely it will help company to build to actually build a good reputation among Indian investors as well as the foreign investors. Now, if there is a corporate governance in place, then definitely the chance of fraudulent activity comes to zero. Either there can be a governance, or either there can be corruption. Like governance and corruption are those things which cannot move side by side. They cannot move simultaneously. Either of one will exist. Either corruption will exist or governance will exist. Both of them are like, in reality, I would say both of them doesn't make sense together. So I think these are the few of the advantages if we talk about corporate governance. So you can include these in your answers while writing about the same. Now I have seen a lot of times that it's being asked in the paper, in the examination, that write about the scope. Now when you talk about scope, it is being seen that some student rather than writing about the scope, they actually try and write about the need or the advantages. You have to understand that there are some points which may be similar to the scope and let's say the need or the advantage, but scope is altogether a different thing, or scope and then oblique element. I'll show you the topic. So it says scope oblique element. So it's a separate topic. There can be few points which can relate to each other, but it will not exactly be the same 100%. So you need to be very cautious about this fact. So it says the scope of the corporate governance, role and power of the board. The first point here is to understand what does we really mean by the scope or the elements. So elements, if I talk about element, means those things which actually come together and form the good corporate governance. You need, sometimes you prepare food, you need ingredients. So you add this, you add that, and thereafter the food actually gets prepared, right? So when you talk about all of that, in other way you call them as an ingredients, but when you talk all of that in corporate governance manner, you call them as an element. So if somebody asks you, like, what are those factors that need to be considered, or what are those factors which constitute corporate governance, then this would be the answer that we will be discussing right now. First is the elements of the board, role, elements or powers of the board. So corporate governance is not something that's being framed by the junior management. So as you would appreciate, traditionally there are three structures in the management. One is the top management, the other is the middle management, and the third one being the lower management, right? So anything that has to do with the policy, the process, or the governance is not something that's being decided by the middle or the lower management. It is decided always by the upper management or the top management. So unless and until the board is serious about it, there is no question of governance at all. If the board is not serious about governance, then forget the lower level and middle level people talking about governance. Why would they care about it? Because more governance means more transparency. So if there is no transparency, it is good for many of the people who actually do wrong things. So I think the tone has to be set from the top, meaning that the first and foremost, the board has to be cautious and aware that they need to actually bring something so that the company can rely on. So this is the very first point, that if you wanted to have a company which is a good corporate company, the board has to be obviously aware of the same, and the board cooperation is also needed. Then you talk about legislation. Obviously legislation here means that the roles, the powers, the duties, the responsibility, the policy, the process, everything should be there. So it is not something that is there for someone and it is not there for the other people, or it is different from people to people. No, the policies have to be similar, policies have to be same. If the policy keeps on changing, like there can be an exceptional circumstances, that's perfectly okay. But exception means exception. Exception doesn't mean that it will happen every day. So if the policy keeps on changing, legislation means only those who actually make the laws or make the policies. So in this context, it means the policy in the process. If that keeps on changing, then the structure won't survive. We talk about board skills. Ultimately, be it policy or process or any of the governance structure, the way it will be presented, I think it depends upon the board skills. If the board is educated, if the board has required skills or the requestive skills, they will understand what needs to be included and what should not be included. If they does not have the required educational skills and the experience, then probably the corporate governance structure, even if it is there, still won't serve any purpose. So you see, there are two things. We say to comply the law in letter and spirit, right? That means whatever is written, you actually follow that. It should not be like that you have just written for the sake of formality and nobody is bothering about it, but it is just written. So we are not going that way. We wanted to make sure that whatsoever has been written needs to be followed by everyone across the organization, and that can only be done once board have an understanding as to what needs to be done. And then the board appointment point is kind of a similar thing. Whenever any new member on the board gets appointed, they should be made aware of their duties and their expectations so that they can guide and provide their input accordingly. Now, talking about the board independence, so it says, let's try and read something up from here. So it says, independent board is essential for the sound corporate governance. The goal may be achieved by associating sufficient number of independent directors with the board. Independence of the board would ensure that there is no actual or perceived conflict of interest. However, a proper balance between independent and non-independent is also very important. You must have heard about various committees that we will discuss, I think, in this subject as well. Talking about the audit committee, risk management committee, there are various other committee like nomination and remuneration committee. The reason as to why I'm being mentioning these committees, because you'll find that these kind of committees have their own composition. Like you should have this many independent directors. If the chairman is an independent director, the constitution of the board will be consisting of this many executive director and this many non-executive director. So all we wanted to do, or all we wanted to make sure, is like the board should have a balance of independent and non-independent, or probably executive directors. Because if the board is having all the independent directors, then independent directors will not interfere in day-to-day functioning of the company. Then who will take care of the day-to-day compliances or day-to-day things of the company? So we really need those people who actually obviously indulge in day-to-day management. Then we also need those people who can actually give their fair or unbiased opinions. So I think this is what we've been really looking for. Then we talk about the board meetings. So corporate governance can't be in short just on the paper, like we've been doing the policies and following the things. That's really not enough. We have really talked about the skills, and the board saying that whenever board of directors get appointed, will share the letter of appointment which will mention the areas on which they need to focus, etc., etc. So it says all of that will not make much sense unless the board meets regularly. If the board is not meeting, how would the independent director would be able to present their point of view, or how would the executive director would be able to discuss any of the internal thing that's been happening in the company? So I think regularly meeting is also one of those important things which makes the communication easy, and also lets the parties or the board to actually convey their point of view and listen to the other parties as well. So it's kind of a exchange of minds. Then I think already talked about code of conduct, whereby I mentioned that it should be something which is similar for everyone. If it is different for me, and then different for you, and then different for someone else, and then different for someone else, it doesn't really make sense. There is no use of that policy if it is being designed in this way, that it actually keeps on changing or probably change as per the needs of the people. Doesn't really make any sense. Then we already talked about the audit committee and risk management committee, whereby I mentioned that these committee or these kinds of committee are being set up to make sure that the company work in the right direction. Because we are talking about governance, and governance, as I just said at the very start, it's also to do with the administration as to how the company actually move forward, what the company really does, and whatsoever the company is being doing, whether that's really correct or not. So if the audit committee is there and they've been meeting regularly in the normal intervals, so they'll obviously guide the board that this is wrong, or this is not correct, or this should be that way. So I think the compliances can also be taken care of. So if the compliances are being done properly, then automatically we are getting very close to being a good corporate governed company. And same with the risk management. So that's what has been mentioned here. So now moving forward, we talk about the evolution of the corporate governance as to how it actually got into place. So there are 4 theories that actually explain this. One is called as the agency theory, the other is the shareholder theory, the third is the stakeholder theory, while the fourth is the stewardship. So agency theory actually relates to the topic called as, you must have read that contract of agency, whereby there is a principal and then there is an agent. So it's being said in the agency theory that the shareholders are obviously the owners, so they are the principals, but they obviously are in large numbers, so they can't manage the company day-to-day operations. So they appoint agent, which is obviously directors in the context of the company, and the directors have to make sure that they comply with the direction that are being given to them by the shareholders or the owners. So this is called as the agency theory, just like a principal and agent, where the principal are the shareholders while the agent are the directors. The second theory is called as a shareholder theory, and in this shareholder theory, it says that it is for the board of directors, or it is the main duty of the board of directors that they always strive and create the wealth and more profit, more dividend, better results for the shareholders, so that the shareholders can get the maximum profit. So this theory just talk about shareholders. It doesn't really talk about any debenture holders, employees, creditors, nothing. It just says the shareholders, as if the company just rely or just work on the support of shareholders, which is practically not correct. But yeah, this theory really talks about the shareholders and says that the shareholders, the company or the director should work in such a way that the shareholders' wealth actually get maximized. Further, it says the directors have to make sure that they comply with any of the directions that have been given by the shareholders, so that there is no conflict of interest, and the director should not try to keep their interest above company. Always and always shareholders interest should come first. The other thing is called as a stakeholder theory. So the stakeholder theory actually talks about the fact that not just the shareholder, as what we were discussing, everyone that's being associated with the company, whether directly or indirectly, should get some benefit out of it. It also includes the creditors, the debenture holders, the employees, the shareholders, even the community, the government, everyone. So this is called as a stakeholder theory. The other one, or the last one here, is called the stewardship theory. Steward, as a word itself suggests, it's more of a caretaking role. So it says the managers and the employee are to safeguard the resources of corporation, its property and interest when the owner is absent. Here, owner means obviously the shareholders. They are like caretakers. Who are like caretakers? The managers, meaning the directors or the employees, are caretakers. They have to take uttermost care of the corporation. They should not use the property for their own or selfish ends. So I think it's more to do, like the shareholder theory is kind of a very narrowed theory, whereby only and only shareholders' perspective has been considered, while stakeholder really goes broad and just include anyone and everyone. The first one, which is an agency theory, just explain as to what is the agency, and also explain that the shareholders obviously are the owners, while the or owners or the principal, while the directors are obviously the agents. And so the directors have to act according to the direction that are being given to them by the principal, which also means the shareholders. And the last one, stewardship theory, means that take caretaker. So it says the directors or the managers are the caretaker of the company and its property. It's not their property, it's the property of the owners, which is obviously the shareholders. So the directors need not use that particular property for their own use. That's what has been mentioned here. Okay, now let's move forward and discuss few of the theories that have been developed in the area of the ESG. So it says in the last 50 years, ESG has changed dramatically. Like nobody was talking about the environment or the governance structure, but in the past 50 years, many countries have included ESG in their legislation, or the rules, or the rules and regulation that are being followed, that need to be followed by a particular company. So starting with the year 1972, that was the very first time where all of this actually got started, and this was in the conference or in the development called as Stockholm. So now you have to understand that just like Stockholm, we will be discussing a lot of scenarios, a lot of conferences or summit that have happened on the ESG. But every summit has its like some of the major points. So every summit is obviously not talking about a similar thing. So what I'll do here, for example, if you talk about Stockholm conference, you don't really need to memorize everything that's being written under the heading summary of events. So for example, in Stockholm conference, you can just mention here that it really talks about environmental issues, or environmental, it took environmental as their major concern. So you can see here it says talking about the environment as a major concern. So what you can do here is just underneath that Stockholm conference, just write it's all about environmental concerns. So what will happen, like when you are about to do the revision of this entire chapter, and when you come to this particular thing, you don't really need to refer everything that's being written on the right. If you just refer environmental concern, you can directly call or relate that particular thing to Stockholm conference. So that was the very first time whereby the environment was really taken into account, and people started understanding that apart from just earning the profits, environment is also very important, because unless and until you get the water, you get the air to survive, what will you do with the money? Like if for example there is no water, right? It is not about expensive or cheap. I'm saying there's no water, right? There's no oxygen, and all of us, not just you, not just me, but all of us, like everyone in the world, have millions and billions of rupees. What would you do with that? Would you eat that money, or would that money can help you to get water? Because water is not there. It's not about, as I said, expensive or cheap. It is not there. So what would you do with that money? I think that's the important point. So in 1972, the things actually got started, and the companies, or probably the economies, started talking about the environmental concern. Moving forward in the year 1992, that was Rio Earth. Rio obviously is in Brazil. I'm sure you must have heard about it. So in Rio, the conference, it was said that social, environment, and economic factors are interdependent on each other, and to make sure that this economy as a whole sustain for a longer period of time, we also need to take into account the environmental thing, the social life, and obviously the economic factors. So these are interdependent on each other. Like if obviously the environment is not favorable, nobody will live in that economy, right? So if environment is favorable, people will live in the economy, so the social life obviously will get boosted. And once people start living, obviously they will start even earning the money, and then they will also start spending the same, so it will also give a boost to the economic side of things. So you see how the things are being interrelated to each other. If the environment is not good, nobody is there, there's no economy. If the environment is good, people will start living there, people will start doing like jobs and business, and obviously that's how the economy grows. So the Rio de Janeiro talks about social, then economic, and then environment. So the first one, Stockholm, just talk about environment, and Rio, after 20 years, we also include the economic and the social side of things. Then we have IFC, which is International Finance Corporation. It says that we need to make sure that we adopt environmental and social safeguard policy and its disclosure statement. So you see, slowly and gradually, people are getting educated, people are getting united. Like say, countries are getting united in terms of the environmental side of things, and they have also started to talk more on the environment. They actually wanted to make sure that they protect the environment in the best possible manner. OECD, which is the one of the major, I would say, kind of a cooperation or a treaty or a conference that happened over the past few years, talks about the corporate governance. So I think this is the very first time whereby the word corporate governance was introduced. Like prior to this, anything that you have watched, be it Stockholm, be it Rio, or be it IFC, they generally talk about environment or include the social and the economic side of things. But I think with the implementation of OECD, the conference, it was the very first time when actually people started talking, or probably including the word corporate governance in the way the company operates. So the OECD talks about the fact that corporate governance should obviously be there in the companies so that it can function well, and obviously there's no scams, and there's high level of transparency, high level of accuracy. So all of that is something that forms a part of corporate governance. Then we have the ISO. ISO regardlessly talk about the social responsibility of the company, and obviously it talks about the implementing and promoting socially responsible behavior throughout the organization. I think when we talk about ISO, it's not. It was way too early, I think, for the concept of CSR, because in 2010 there was no concept of CSR as such. In the Companies Act 2013, it was the very first time when CSR actually got introduced. But ISO is kind of a similar to CSR. Obviously, we'll not name ISO as CSR, but if you see its content, so it says that the company or the organization need to think obviously about the society, and they should be socially responsible. So what do you mean by socially responsible? Means that you provide better quality of products or service, side by side also take care of the issues in the society, and make sure that the society also grows along with the company. So I think we have been indirectly talking about corporate social responsibility. So you see, these are the those points which you can probably write down in the left, wherever you find space, so that once you start revision of this entire subject, you don't need to spend like 2 to 3 minutes reading the entire thing. You just refer on the left whatever you have written, and that is all done. Like you don't really go into the details much, because anything that you have written in the left as to what I was saying, I think that really covers up everything. That are the main points. So that are those keywords that actually the examiner would be looking for in case these kind of things are being asked in the examination. So above we have studied about Rio de Janeiro, and now we have Rio plus 20. So obviously this was a thing whereby the first time the word sustainable development. So where I think OECD was the very first conference whereby we introduced the word corporate governance, while Rio Plus 20 is the summit whereby the sustainable development, which is also a kind of an inclusive word that just includes everything that we have talked about above, be it economy, be it environment, be it society, be it corporate governance. When you talk about sustainable development, it just include everything. It's a very broad word and just include anything and everything whatsoever is being needed by the company to make sure that it fulfill its obligation towards the society, towards the economy. Then we have sustainable banking and finance network. So this talks about the twin goals of improved ESG risk management and increased capital flows to activities with positive climate impact. Now, see, this is the very first chapter we've been discussing. As we move along, we'll find out that the green energy or the concept of green energy or yellow energy is being there in most of the countries of the world. So green energy, I'm sure you would understand renewable energy, but what is yellow energy? It's like a solar energy coming from the sun. You must have seen a lot of advertisement these days on television, radio, on your mobile as well. And even if not, then I can tell you that government is being encouraging people to actually install solar rooftop panels on their homes so that they can, generate the electricity and use it for their own purpose. So the solar panel cost may be high at the very start, but then slowly and gradually it will benefit you at a later stage. So this is the yellow energy. So when we talk about the sustainable banking, it says that the money need to be invested now in more of the climate friendly things rather than investing in those things which actually harm our environment. We will invest the money in those things which actually protects our environment and make this planet a better place to live. Then we have network of central bank and supervisors for greening the financial system, NGFS. So it says this particular agreement was being signed to make sure that the green capital actually get mobilized and low carbon investment in the broader context of environment sustainable development. So when we talk about low carbon investment, so there are concept even in India. It's not that popular here, but obviously in world various countries are being given carbon credits. Like if there's something that that can be done by an alternative means by which the pollution will not be emitted. So if you do it, let's say by renewable energy, the government will give you carbon credits, which you can use it in tax subsidy or various other initiative. So in other words, I can also say that the carbon credits or these types of things are being used to encourage the corporates so that they actually use more and more reliable sources or renewable sources, and if they do the same, then they will also get benefit later on in tax or in various other things. So I think the one that we just talked about, NGFS, talks about these kind of initiative. So all in all, it's kind of an thing, or it's kind of an environment whereby now the countries are getting kind of serious and they are trying to make sure that we actually follow the economic, social, and environmental side of things, and then also include the corporate sustainability or the corporate governance, sustainable development. We talked about green energy, we talked about yellow energy, low carbon credits, or probably low carbon emission things. So all of that is something that actually is being taking to us as a world towards a better place where the pollution or things like that actually get reduces. Now, in the year 2020, we have another thing which is called as International Organization of Securities Commission. So this is the body which makes sure that the securities are actually better regulated. So it's not just about living in the planet. It's not just about a healthy air and a water. We also need to make sure that the people who actually invest in the securities market also stays safe and protected. Because I think if you remember, we started with this Stockholm conference whereby we talked about environment, and slowly and gradually we also included economy, we also included society. So I think when you ask people to invest money in various projects, which are obviously green energy project or renewable project, um, you would expect that those people who are investing actually get a confidence that their investment is in safe hands. So I think this 2020 conference really talks about the fact that they will introduce some kind of standards which actually set up a benchmark for the security market. And by this, there are chances, if any, of the fraud or anything of that sort that can be reduced to the extent as possible. So it's basically a thing or a mechanism whereby you've been trying to win the confidence of the investors so that they actually come forward and invest money in these kind of securities. Then in the year 2021, we talked about IFRS, International Sustainability Standard Board. So this is basically about meeting the information need of the investors, because now if you see from the previous conference, we've been shifting our focus towards security market, towards investor, winning their trust, winning their confidence. And as you would know, we also discussed that just at the start of this chapter, that when we talk about corporate governance, it is more to do with the accuracy, reliability, transparency. So unless until the investor gets a complete information as to where the money is getting invested, and whether that is being invested in some sustainable projects or otherwise, they will not be able to make the informed decision for their next investment. So all we want to make sure by this 2021 IFRS that the investor stays informed as to what is being happening um, with the investment that they have given to the company, whether that's being invested in some sustainable project or otherwise. So we've been trying to make sure that the investor stays educated all the time. So I think this is pretty much everything about various conferences that are being there. Okay, so moving forward, we're gonna talk about a different thing. So this is called as governance from the Indian sculptures or scriptures. The one that we have discussed above was in the context of global economy. So we didn't really say that, or I think probably none of the other theories that you actually have read and we have actually discussed is from India or Indian originated. It's kind of a Western countries originated. So now we talk about like we shift our focus from the global economy to our, which is Indian economy, and let's now try and find out what is being going on inside our economy. So before we really talk about those sophisticated and corporate theory as to what we have discussed above, we will take you to the ancient time in the Indian sculptures, be it Mahabharata, Ramayana, whereby the values or the importance of corporate governance have been taught from time to time. So it says the corporate governance is obviously a kind of a word which is more of a modern word, right? But you actually, if you go back in the Indian ancient tradition, rich tradition, you'll find that the corporate governance was already in place. Obviously, people were not that educated. There was no college as such. Those not very big universities and all. So they didn't really coined the thing as corporate governance, but as to what they were doing at that particular point of time is kind of equivalent to a corporate governance thing. So it says if you go back to the ancient time, you'll find that the corporate governance thing was also there. Obviously, there was no corporate as such in the previous time. There was kingdom, right? So king was the one who is actually ruling the place and making sure to set up the rules, and those who don't follow the rules, they are to be punished. And the king actually also set up a formal system of justice whereby the people used to come to the kingdom or the court of the king, and thereafter they're being heard, and accordingly a decision was being passed. So I think in the modern way we've been also doing the similar thing, but it's just more systematic way and probably more written way. In the past the things were not that much written, that was not obviously that formal. So all of that is a kind of a modern, in a modernized word, things are exactly the same but obviously with a different approach. So it says if we talk about governance, so it says governance has no inequality. In governance there is no rich, there is no poor, everyone is same. Like if I talk about justice in the courts or wherever you go, if I talk about justice, does any law or anything that you have read so far, you are into CS professional, so you've already learn and discussed a lot of laws, right? Lot of legislation. And I'm sure you might have not encountered any law which really says that justice will be given to the rich and not to the poor, or vice versa. When you talk about justice, they can't be like any kind of inequality. If there is inequality, there can't be any justice. So similar is with the governance. Governance means better administration, and it is for everyone, not just for one, or not just for rich, or not just for poor. And then it says it on the basis of trust that these things actually grow and develop, and it actually promote the commitment to duty. Governance should promote education to one, and also similar to the point number one as to what we have discussed. Governance should promote the good health of all persons in the society. So whatever happens in governance is for everyone. You can, I mean, if I put that straight, so this is something that we can understand. So be it about inequality, be it about education, be it about health, it has to be equal for everyone. So there can't be any discrimination. If there's any, it is not an example of good governance. So this is, I think, a very simple thing to understand. Either there can be inequality or governance. Both things can't exist together. Now, as I was saying, that if you take the example of Indian scriptures, which was obviously there, and one of them is Bhagavad Gita, which is obviously a holy book in terms of the Hindu tradition. So you'll find a lot of quotations there. It's being written in Hindi, but I can also tell you in English. So it says, whatever has happened, it is good. It was good actually, and then whatever is happening is also good, and then whatever will happen in the future will also be good. So I think it's kind of a thing. It's a kind of a quotation that's being written in various scriptures in the Hindu tradition, and one of them is obviously in front of you. So it says the Bhagavad Gita actually talks about dharma. Dharma means your obligations to the society, your family, your friends. That a code of conduct, like in the modern world, we call dharma as a code of conduct, right? So that's what I was saying even earlier as well in the last page, that nothing actually has changed. It's just like we are now kind of more educated, more books around. So we have developed some of these sophisticated words, like rather than calling dharma, we call it as a code of conduct. Obviously, it was governance in the initial time. Now we call it as a corporate governance. So if you actually relate the things, you'll find, I'm not saying that 100% things obviously will be the same, but you'll find majority is exactly the same, because the people have changed, the times have changed, the crime have increased. So obviously the things has to change according to that. But the roots of everything actually are similar as to what we used to have probably 500 years before from now. So it says, when you talk about dharma, it actually gives you the thing whereby you have to make sure that if you are a king or anybody who's been ruling a particular area, that public interest should be given priority. So I think the similar thing, whosoever is like a minister or anything at the particular point of time in any government across the world, those minister actually takes oath that they will not put their personal interest first. And I think similar is for the company. The director should not put their interest first. If you remember, we read some of the theories called as stakeholder, shareholder, remember all of that. So we did discuss that in some of the theories, that directors will not prioritize their interest. They will not treat company property as their own property. So similar is the thing that we've been mentioning here, that those probably who are in power will make sure that whatever they decide is in the interest of a larger section of the people. They will not do anything which actually bring a conflict of interest between themselves and the public, and transparency should always be there. So whatever they do, whatever they say, transparency element should always be available. So this is something that we can probably find out from Bhagavad Gita, which is obviously one of the holy books in terms of the Hindu religion. Moving forward, we talk about Artha Shastra. Now, this is again an example of strong corporate governance, and it says about king as to what are the duties of the king. So, when we talk about king, queen, it means those people who have a lot of money, a lot of power, and a lot of people, a big house, and all of that. So, it says king is typically, obviously, in the eyes of people, king is someone like this, as to what I've described. But then, if you talk about from the perspective of king, so king is nothing but the servant of the public. These ministers or these IAS, if I talk about in the modern times, they may be like very big personalities, like whatever they are. But if you actually read their code of conduct, it will be written everywhere that you are the servant to the public. You need to serve the public. You should not You should not take the advantages of your designation or power or position. Instead, help the public in getting the right thing or the justice as to what is needed. So I think that is what even that has been mentioned here, that the king is a servant of the public, and leaders should be responsible and accountable as to whatever they say, because people look towards leader for various things. So if the leader is kind of an immature or doesn't really take things seriously, then obviously it will not give a good message to the other people. Then there has to be a strict code of conduct which is similar for everyone. I think we discussed that previously as well when we were talking about corporate governance, that this is not a corporate governance. The rule from Mr. A is different and Mr. B is different, then Miss C is different, Miss D it is different. It will not work that way. I mean, see, if I talk about corporate governance and you ask me, for example, sir, is there any law in India about corporate governance, just like Companies Act or any other law? Do we have any corporate governance act 2020 or 2025? The answer is no. There's nothing whatsoever. So it's kind of an internal thing as to how corporate governance is more about accuracy, transparency, policy, process, protocol, code of conduct. There's no one rule that really talks about it. But then if you read various laws, legislation, you will find that they will always encourage you to do better, to be transparent. So in a way, those laws are being taking, or those laws have been formed to make sure that corporate governance stays in place, so, but there's no law as such which really talks about corporate governance act. So there's nothing like that. But all the laws that are being applicable to the company, if the company follows them, then obviously that is the example of corporate governance. Then now, moving ahead, we have the theories of the business ethics, and this can be divided in two parts. One is called as teleological, and the other is called as deontological. Now, what does these theory actually means? First, we're going to discuss the teleological theory. Teleological theory, it says the word teleological is derived from the Greek word telos, which means an end. So it says, according to the teleological theories, the tightness of the action is determined solely by the consequences rather than by action. So I think in the end of the day, all we want here is to make sure that the things actually get right. So it says the tightness of the action is determined by consequences rather than actions. What if you be too hard to the people? For example, if you take an example on your personal or professional life, if you be too hard to your friends, there will be a time when nobody will talk to you. If you think that being hard or being, being too much stubborn can really help you to get the work done, it won't happen. I mean, I'm not saying that we have to be too flexible. So it is a kind of a balance that we really have to maintain. Sometimes we have to be flexible and sometimes we have to be hard as well. So I think that's what this theory is really talking about, that you actually focus on the consequences. That if you are ruler, yeah, right, if you are king or a queen and you be too hard to the people of your kingdom, then there are chances, like if you increase the taxes to very high, and if you send people to jail and things of that sort, even if they do a minor fault, then slowly and gradually a kind of negative view will be developed towards that king or the queen, and the moment they get a better alternative, they'll throw you out. So this is not the right way to treat the people. So it has to be a balance of these two things. Then the other is called as deontological theory, which means duty. So it says, according to deontological theories, certain actions are right not due to the benefit to the self or others, but due to their basic natures of the rules underlining them. So if somebody, example is also being given here, if somebody takes a bribe, right? It's he or she is not taking a bribe from you. There are two persons called as A and B. A is giving bribe to B, but A, B, U, I, everyone will live in the same society, right? So if obviously this is a transaction between A and B, so it has nothing to do with me and obviously nothing to do with you personally as well. But then if you look to as a perspective from the society, then this is not a good message for the society, because slowly and gradually these things will also get built up and people will start doing this. Those who are even not aware, or those who are probably in the dilemma whether they should do it or not, they will also get encouraged to do it. So when we talk about deontological theory, it says that even if somebody is not or something is not affecting you directly, but it is affecting the society as a whole, it should be stopped. It is your duty. Dentological, dento means duty. It is your duty to stop anything which might not be affecting you directly, but it is affecting the society as a whole. So we should stop it. So that's what dentological theory is really all about. So moving on to the next topic, which is called as the concept of the majority and the minority. So I think there's a very celebrated case law which is called as Foss versus Harbotle, whereby it was being said by the court that they will not interfere in the internal functionality of the company, and they also said that generally it unless there is a contrary to be proved, it will always be assumed that the majority is always correct. But in case the minority is being able to prove that majority is being trying to actually misuse the provisions of law or being doing something which is against the interest of minority and obviously against the interest of the company as well, then only in that case the court will interfere. Otherwise, the court won't interfere because you see that. For example, if there are 100 shareholders, I'm just taking a very small example. In a listed companies, you'll find like millions of people are the shareholders. So if some people are not happy with the decision, so obviously if they go to the courts, so I think if court keeps on interfering like this, then the working of the company won't be possible. So that is why the court says that this is the internal matter between the company and the shareholder, and they should sort it out between themselves. But just in case those people who are being objecting proves that any decision that has been taken by the majority is against the interest of the company as a whole, then only the court will interfere. Otherwise, the court won't interfere. So this is pretty much about the majority versus the minority rights. So this is the thing. Now we actually move ahead and talk about the corporate governance in Indian ethos. I think we have already discussed few of this part in the previous things, whereby we took the examples of the Hindu scriptures, whereby we discussed the duties or the responsibility of the king towards the people and the kingdom. Now we're going to discuss some more about it, and we will now celebrate or probably talk about one of the most important things in the ancient time that happened in the Indian tradition. So we're going to discuss that thing right now. So if I talk about a few others big things in the ancient Indian times, so it can be Ramayana, it can be Bhagavad Gita as well as Mahabharata, and each of them actually has something or the other which can probably help us to understand the significance of the corporate governance. Talking about Ramayana, it says it is an example of good corporate governance model whereby they were following the thing called as Ram Rajya. Ram Rajya, even in today times, means that people are good at heart. They don't have any spirit of cheating or doing fraud with each other. The ruler of that particular kingdom is also a nice person who actually do justice with everyone. So I think everything is 10 on 10 is a Ram Rajya. So this is not something that somebody have told to those people who used to live in Ayodhya or similar places that they need to follow this. But then they had certain kind of a love, respect, mutual love with each other, and that is why they did all of these things. So even we didn't name those things as corporate governance at that particular point of time, and we call them as Ram Rajya, but then Ram Rajya and corporate governance are not a different thing at all. Like I've already told you, in the modern world we have used different abbreviation, but if you try and look into the details, you'll find out that it's kind of a similar thing that's been happening. Then we talk about Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is actually a scripture which actually talks about purity of heart, fearlessness, knowledge, yoga, charity, self-control, and sacrifice. So this is what we expect from those people who are the leaders, that they actually do anything and everything possible for the benefit of the company, for the benefit, let's say if they are the leaders, for the benefit of the nation, without thinking about themselves. So this is the true spirit that was there in the previous time, and if we implement that particular thing these days, then obviously we will just replicate all of that. So as I mentioned earlier and just now, and again mentioning it probably for the fourth and the fifth time, that the things have actually whatsoever they have done in the past is exactly those things which we are now trying and are trying to understand, and we have given them some big names and big definition, all of that. But those people were not that much educated. Those used to live, let's say, 100 years before from now, or 1,000 years before from now. Still, they have everything that's being needed at this particular point of time. Talking about Mahabharata, so it says it's about the truth and the justice, and it's also talk about the fact that the ruler actually should be a person who follows the code of conduct or dharma, as to what we discussed, and should actually not use the power to actually suppress the voice of people, but instead use the power to make the life of the people better, and should not use the luxury to make his life better, but should use the luxury to make the life of the people who are in his kingdom even better. So this is what all these scriptures have actually told us, and this is something that if we replicate everything which is being probably taught thousands of years before from now, then obviously we will be leading our country with the good corporate governance example. Talking about the CEO and the directors, comparison or comparing those CEO directors of the company with a king, it says there are four duties of a king that used to happen in the previous time, and now you can say there are four duties of the CEO or the directors of the company. First is Raksha, meaning that they need to protect the company, the assets, and all the people who've been working or associated with the company. That's the point number one duty of the director or the CEO. This was a similar duty of the king or the queen in the previous time. Then it says Vriddhi, which means growth. So if you invest any amount of money in the company, being the investor, the whole purpose of investing is to grow your money. So I think the second responsibility of the CEO or the director at this particular point of time is to make sure that the investors actually get a good return from whatever they've been investing. Palana means the compliance, means you being getting obedient, following the rules, the regulation, the code of conduct. So obviously that was there in the previous time. We call it as dharma, but now we call it as a compliance or legislation or laws. So we need to follow that. And the fourth being the kashima, which means the well-being of all the people, which is in the form of CSR. Remember, when we were talking about all those theories that have been given by the Western countries, I mentioned that the CSR obviously is not included in any of those theories. But when you talk about the society welfare, you talk about society development, you indirectly actually has been talking about the CSR only. So you see, CSR was itself a word that has been coined in the Companies Act 2013. It was not there prior to it, or even it was there for public sector. It was not a mandatory thing. So, but then thousands of years before, those king who actually used to govern a particular place or a kingdom, they also spend a good amount of money in making sure that the people actually stays educated, being aware. So all of that was also there. Obviously, it may not be in a very big scale, but it was still there. So that's what has been mentioned here. So I think we'll just keep it for this class. We'll just keep the lectures till here only, and then in the next class we're going to continue with the corporate developments in India. So all those theory that we have discussed previously in this class was also related to kind of the Western world or the other countries. But when we meet in the next class, we're going to discuss all of that in the context of India, as to how the Indian thing actually got started and focused on the corporate governance and where we are at this particular point of time. So all of this is something that we will discuss in the next class. So I hope that everything that I've told in this entire class, you were able to understand the same. If you have any question, you can just let me know. Also, do note that apart from this ESG, as to what you're watching in complete English, we do have this subject in the combination of Hindi and English. And apart from that, be it drafting, CMADD, CSR, SMCF, OCRVI, IBC, IPR, everything is being available in the form of detail, as well as the fast track classes, and obviously in the combination of Hindi and English and in complete English as well. And if you're watching for the very first time, because this was the very first class, so I also like to tell you that we do have the test series available for all subjects. And the best part of that test series is that I personally draft the questions, which is obviously in line with the ICSI question paper pattern. And then once you submit the answers, I personally check the same as well. The reason as to why I'm being emphasis on I, because there have been a lot of academy whereby your test series are being checked by some students only. They are probably rank holders, with all due respect, or even executive student. They are checking your test series, so you can yourself imagine what kind of reality would that test series show to you. But here, obviously, I'll do that. I'll do the checking, and post checking, I'll share a detailed evaluation sheet whereby I'll show you what are the keywords that are missing in your answers. And if you include those things in your answer, definitely you can score better. The last thing is our important questions, which obviously are available before the examination for all subjects. So you can also enroll for the same. Thank you so much once again for choosing Shantanu and Tanya.